Hi legends, we got an interesting one here today. We're going to be talking about why fast food is no longer cheap or convenient.
Fast food has never been good food, but it was a quick, easy, reliable, and cheap way to get a meal that appealed to people who were time poor or just, well, actually poor. Mass layoffs, increasing economic uncertainty, deferred student loan payments kicking in, and spiking levels of consumer debt should be the perfect opportunity for these cheap offerings to bring in customers who don't have much money to spare.
Yeah, and I mean, just to bring up some things from the past, back on the Friday and Saturday nights, you'd have your friends over or other family members. It usually would be fast food night and one of those nights on the weekend. And you'd order a couple pizzas and some drinks, garlic bread with delivery. And it cost next to nothing, and you'd feed the whole family. McDonald's, I mean, I remember they used to have really good value meals where you could get like 4 burgers, 4 fries, 4 drinks. Wouldn't cost that much either. So it just seems like in such a short period of time, it's not a short period of time, but it just feels quick. We've gone from A to C and not know what happened at B, and hopefully we find out today in this video.
But still want to eat. For a long time, companies like McDonald's, Domino's, KFC, Taco Bell, and Wendy's were considered recession-proof because even in the most dire of circumstances, people still need to eat, and the companies typically offered the best exchange rate of dollars to calories in the market. But that's changed. In a business move that can only be described as confusing, these brands have responded to cost-conscious, busy, and desperate consumers by becoming more expensive, slower, and less reliable.
Yeah, that's amazing to me, that the fact that, people are more broke and in more dire need of support, and these big chains, these big billion-dollar companies are responding by making the portion sizes smaller, the quality worse, and also still charging extra for it. Crazy, right?
Unsurprisingly, sales across the industry have plummeted at a time when they should be outperforming. It would almost be comical if they weren't collectively some of the largest employers in the country. However, the McRecession has been caused by more than some management missteps. It's a clear sign of some much bigger problems in the wider economy.
It's supposed to be cheap, quick, and an easy option.
I personally stopped eating out at fast food for me because it got so expensive it wasn't worth the money.
McDonald's posted its biggest US sales decline in nearly 5 years.
I buy the McChicken sandwich. It's $3, almost $4.
It's also hitting what traditionally had become the cheaper option. But for many, that's no longer the case.
Okay, so before we get into the fast food industry as the canary in the coal mine for much larger structural economic problems, there is something more important you need to understand. Fast food locations used to be fun. Pizza Huts looked like actual huts. Chuck E. Cheese had rodent-themed decor, and McDonald's was full of bright colors, escaped convicts, and nightmare-inducing clowns. That's clearly changed, and now almost any fast food store you go into is the same generic style of nondescript, boxy modern commercial building. This has happened for a few reasons that are each very revealing about the broader direction the industry has gone.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, you remember going to like a Burger King, Hungry Jack's as it's called in Australia, or a McDonald's. They'd be very bright and kind of vibrant. You'd also see these colourful playgrounds out the front usually, especially in the 90s. The big slides and the jungle gyms and things like that. It was just so enticing to the eye. And now you look at these businesses and they look very dystopian, like, the same square corner businesses. I'm very curious to hear why, but I've certainly noticed a difference myself.
The first reason is that children have become less important to overall business demand. In the good old days, companies would advertise directly to children in the hopes they would effectively become little sales representatives and throw a shit fit until their parents gave in and took them to get some deep-fried slop. Regulations around advertising to children and a general cultural shift away from feeding children too much unhealthy food means that companies can't rely on this market as much anymore, though. According to a YouGov survey, Americans between the ages of 18 and 34 are now the largest consumers of fast food, with 42% reporting they consume it several times a week.
I know that Morgan Spurlock, may he rest in peace, came out with Super Size Me in the mid-2000s, I think it was. And I remember that had like a big sort of like global ripple effect in regards to fast food. Because I remember after that movie came out, when I was a manager at McDonald's, they stopped doing Super Size. And I don't know if that movie in particular was a catalyst for raising more awareness for dietary, I guess, intake for kids and families and whatnot. There's also been the case of families suing McDonald's for selling unhealthy meals and stuff. I guess these things could all have a ripple effect. I don't know if this is why these companies are not directly marketing to kids anymore, but it's certainly food for thought.
Demographic shifts means this age group is now less likely to have children of their own, so the extra money and maintenance on custom storefronts isn't worth it since a ball pit is unlikely to appeal to most 20-somethings. No shame though. Shifting consumer trends are one thing, but the bigger reason is that restaurant locations have become far less important and much more interchangeable. According to market data from the consulting firm McKinsey & Company, people are now almost twice as likely to order food through a delivery service like Uber Eats or DoorDash than they are to physically sit in a fast food restaurant and eat their meal.
That's crazy to me. Like, sometimes I know you have a big day at work and you need the convenience because you don't want to leave the house again. Call up, pay a premium, get Uber Eats. Fair enough. But the fact that people are doing that all the time, man, like, if you're willing to burn all those bills so often, I mean, I'll take your money. You can give it to me for free.
Fast food locations are increasingly just becoming distribution centers for Postmate drivers, so maybe we shouldn't be surprised that they have started looking like Amazon warehouses. Anyway, alongside ingredients and staffing, the real estate these restaurants sit atop is simultaneously the largest expense in most locations as well as being a significant asset. As the story goes, Ray Kroc, the man responsible for scaling McDonald's into a global fast food empire, figured out that he wasn't in the burger business. He was in the real estate business. To this day, for the majority of fast food locations, most of the money is made by the commercial real estate. The restaurant that sits on the land is basically just a tenant producing cash flows. It doesn't matter if the tenant is a Wendy's or a McDonald's. So stores have become more uniform to lower the cost of construction and the risk of having an unusual building that nobody else wants to rent if a franchise moves out. So if you want to know why fast food restaurants look so boring these days, you can blame real estate speculation, shifting socioeconomics, and middleman technology.
I mean, I don't understand money and I don't understand real estate as much as more educated people. That makes sense. You know what I mean? Basically, if you're making things more uniform, basically more versatile for both your business and the potential to sell your business in the future, that makes sense. It's disappointing. I miss the magic that all these stores had with their marketing and presentation in the 80s, but at least from this point of view, I guess it makes sense.
Something of a recurring theme on this channel. Now anyway, this whole game only works if these businesses still bring in cash, and to do that they need to move some hamburgers. The trouble is, that's getting really hard. Fast food prices have increased significantly beyond inflation. According to data collected from Finance Buzz, the average McDonald's menu item is now twice as expensive as it was 10 years ago. This trend is partially because fast food items used to be artificially cheaper than they should have been. When people would order in-store, there was more opportunity to upsell them to larger meal sizes and tack on higher margin extras like desserts and drinks.
Okay, I can back this up. Don't forget, I used to be a McDonald's manager in the 2000s. I'm kind of like that B period that I was talking about. You know, we went from A, cheap, to C, expensive. Now I was working in that B period, right? Anyway, when I was at the McDonald's, the way they made most of their profit was actually through drinks, at least when I was there. You know, back at the time, you would, I guess, pour a drink for about 15 cents. If you sold a large Coke or something, boom, there you go. There's $4 right there. You know what I mean? That's a massive markup. I remember a product item, for example, like chicken nuggets. If you included all the wastage and everything, you know, the nuggets that wouldn't get sold on time, McDonald's would be pretty much breaking even on those things, most franchise stores, if not even losing a little bit of money on the nuggets. So there is some truth to this. There'd be some product lines that would make huge margin of profit, like the drinks, for example, and the frozen Cokes, because you're selling air. They're all really fluffy. And then, you know, the chicken products I found were the ones that would barely break even or lose money. Now, your interpretation of this, if you've worked in the industry, might be different, but that's how it worked out when I was there anyway.
So they can make their staple menu items cheaper to attract customers. Now, ingredients and rent has become more expensive, and on top of that, restaurants need to give a significant portion of their top-line revenue to delivery companies. To maintain their margins, they had to raise prices, and their pivot to more premium branding was a way to justify this change without acknowledging that getting food hand-delivered is a luxury with inherent increased costs. Fast food companies aren't allowed to directly offer lower prices in their stores than they do via delivery apps, even though they don't have the additional expenses. So they have had to become sneaky and offer various meal deals so that in-restaurant customers can get better deals if they are willing to navigate through deals via their own apps and pick out in-store meal combinations. If you are a savvy Mick connoisseur and you are willing to sit down, do the math, and make the most of various deals on the company-run fast food apps and in-store offers, you can end up paying half as much for the same food as someone who just turned their brain off and poked at the cheeseburger pictures they wanted on their delivery app of choice.
Yeah, look, let's be honest. Most people are lazy or ignorant, or, basically busy even. You could be busy, just like, I'll just get the food. I'm not going to look for the deals. Lazy is in too lazy to install the app, or ignorant, just not even knowing that it exists altogether, right?
This has made shopping for fast food increasingly confusing and time-consuming, which is exactly the opposite reason why customers go to these companies in the first place. Now, the companies are not exactly blameless victims in this trend. Bloated and confusing menus and premium offerings had the potential to extract the most possible money out of the widest spectrum of customers, from the rich and lazy to the poor and savvy. But now, the market has turned against them, and this clever little business model could be their undoing. So it's time to learn how money works to find out if fast food companies have cooked themselves.
I think we live in an information age, and also an age where there's just so many options now. So if these fast food companies are dropping their standard and getting too expensive, people might be finding a local food market or a good value food truck or a mum and pop cafe. I mean, the options could be endless, you know what I mean? It's not like when we were young and you just had a few options here and there, although I think you guys in the United States have always had a lot of options. In Australia, not so much. But now you can I can walk outside here. I live on the outskirts of the city. I can walk outside here, and within like 100 meters, I've got the options of probably about at least 50 food places that I could eat in. I think people realize this now, and they're not going to pay top dollar for a subpar product, essentially.
As Q1 earnings have been revealed, some brands have actually increased their sales. Taco Bell, which is owned by the conglomerate Yum! Brands, increased average store sales by 9% compared to last year. This success has been attributed almost exclusively to the company's Lux boxes, which have become what fast food used to be: a large quantity of food with a lot of calories for not very much money.
One thing I really, really like in Australia is the Zinger boxes and combos at the KFC, and also the Burger King, aka Hungry Jack's, I think Hunger Tamers. You pay a little bit more than a traditional meal, but you also get a couple burgers, maybe some chicken windings, some nuggets, whatever, some fries, and you'll actually eat it and be full afterwards. This is probably the biggest issue I have with McDonald's. You'll get a meal these days and you will not be satisfied afterwards. But if you go to one of these other chains and you pay an extra few dollars for either Zinger box, Hunger Tamer box, generally you're usually quite satisfied. And so I think this is a good business model for Taco Bell, having different price points for different boxes. And if people are feeling satisfied and they've got their money's worth, hey, they deserve to make their profit.
Even though the industry declined overall, Taco Bell grew because it attracted customers priced out of other options. The company's own CEO boasted on the earnings call that the company's performance was thanks to massive wins with low-income consumers.
Sure.
Yum! Brands, which also owns chains like KFC and Pizza Hut, does not invest heavily into real estate like McDonald's, and instead rents most of their locations from third-party commercial landlords. This means that when picking a location to open a store, they don't have to worry about the underlying fundamentals of the area and the real estate market. They can focus exclusively on what locations are going to bring in the most foot traffic. This also lets brands operate in locations that would otherwise be considered undesirable by real estate investors with a side hustle in burgers. Across the rest of the industry, though, fast food as a whole has largely lost ground to people just choosing to cook from home. I know this isn't exactly groundbreaking news to you watching, but food has become kind of expensive.
So that's what I want to know more about, actually. What are families doing as an alternative to fast food restaurants now, and what are they cooking at home? I have a girlfriend. When we go overseas to her home, it's very cheap to eat out more and get market food. But when we're here in Australia, she's usually cooking something very cheap, like a rice dish or a noodle dish. We might go eat out once or twice a week, you know what I mean? But that's easy for me, being sort of like in a easy relationship. I don't have like a marriage or kids or anything like that. So maybe let us know in the comments, if you've got a family, what are you guys doing for food every other night of the week?
The key demographics of young workers that consume fast food are the same people who are getting laid off first, and statistically have less savings to get them through periods of reduced income. These people also on average have more debt to manage outside of a residential mortgage. By now, you have probably seen the memes about being able to split your burrito purchase into 4 easy installments using Klarna through DoorDash.
I mean, I think that's nuts. Like, you know, these afterpay services and all that, it's kind of like the new lay-by. Back in the day, you'd find an item you wanted from a supermarket and you would pay it in installments and eventually take the item. Now, the new business model now is a bit more impulsive. You get the item first and then you pay it off. I can understand that with luxuries, you know, things like gaming, consoles, sports equipment, things like that, fair enough. But when it comes with for necessities and things you actually need to like live and survive, to go into debt over something that's like an actual requirement for life, I think that is absolutely crazy that this is a thing.
Now, this has probably been blown out of proportion, as Klarna is just a payment processor that a lot of people are more comfortable with over a credit card or a bank transfer. But it's a humorous way to acknowledge the more serious issue that people are going into debt just to keep up, and new platforms like this are making it easier than ever to do. Klarna and similar services now represent an extra $700 billion worth of consumer debt that isn't being officially recorded, on top of over $1 trillion in credit card debt and student debt, which people now actually need to pay again. So people are short on cash, but these companies are also losing another group of consumers. Fast food has typically been popular with people who just didn't have that much time after working a long shift and then spending an hour or more commuting. But even that has become less of a selling point. Fast food is not that fast anymore. Average wait times have increased significantly, which means unless you are willing to pay the premium to get food delivered, it's almost faster to cook some basic food for yourself.
I was hoping he would mention this point. So here is a little bit of a paradox when it comes to, I guess, time and both value. Because if running, late, you've had a big shift, or you're running late to work and you want to go into a drive-thru or whatever, the lines are usually incredibly big these days. So yeah, that's no longer convenient. But then, okay, we'll do the order option when we get home or get to work. And then it's like paid at a premium, sometimes like a third, even like 0.5% more, 150% more than the usual asking price. And so that's not convenient either, because you're going to be put out of pocket more. So you've either got really long wait times or a really expensive bill if you get delivered. And so see where I say it's like none of those options are convenient anymore. They're the paradox.
Now, fast food getting slower has happened for two reasons. The first is that larger menus make it harder to prepare food in advance and keep it ready to be instantly handed over. Now, this also means that food is prepared to order, which is nice. Apart from the second reason, fast food turnover is higher than it's ever been, and overall staff care is low because people simply do not value these jobs as much as they once did. Now, expecting people to go above and beyond for a minimum wage job at a fast food franchise is clearly a bit dumb, but it's getting harder to find people that want to do the job at all. Once again, fast food companies have kind of been outmaneuvered by the delivery apps. Minimum wage workers now have more options, and delivering food and answering to an algorithm is more attractive to a lot of people than cooking food and answering to the power-tripping shift manager. Of course, the obvious solution is to just pay people more, and some companies are basically being forced to do that, but then they either need to raise their prices even further or cut into already razor-thin margins.
Yeah, right. I mean, I do think fast food workers work way too hard for too little money. But traditionally, the whole argument was, okay, well, if you want a good job, then get an education and then give yourself the opportunity for something that pays better, right? But this whole world is like ass backwards now, because you got bums like me that can work on YouTube and make a living. And fair enough, I do a lot of hours and everything, but I'm not slaving away at the fry station for 12 hours a day, you know what I mean? And then you got people actually building the world who aren't getting a fair go of it, so to speak. And so I don't know how to answer this complex issue. It's a very, very complicated thing that goes certainly beyond the realms of my understanding. I would love to see fast food workers get paid more, simply the fact they work hard. Getting food is a necessity, and also the amount of shit they put up with. I mean, I could certainly understand why they're not going to accept a shitty wage for being in those kind of conditions. But then if you pay them more, then us who goes to these fast food restaurants are not going to get a good deal on the products anymore. Geez, like, where do you solve this problem?
These companies are investing a lot of money into automated kitchens to cut down on staff before they get too much negotiating power. But that technology is still in its infancy, and these brands have shareholders to answer to now. If they raise prices anymore, they will also be competing directly with slightly more upmarket fast casual dining, and even local independent restaurants, which are getting harder to differentiate from. longer wait times and a slightly more expensive menu is expected at these stores. For people who want convenience and are willing to pay a few extra dollars for it, they can just order from these more upmarket restaurants off the apps as well. People who aren't worried about paying a $5 delivery fee and 20% delivery tip also aren't going to think twice about paying a few extra dollars to get chef-prepared food over a barely assembled McChicken. For everybody else, the struggles of the cheapest restaurant is a sign of a pretty bleak financial reality. Most of the CEOs that presented poor earnings for this quarter acknowledged tough economic times for people choosing to eat takeaway less, concluding that cooking from home has become much more popular for people looking to make their money go further.
You know what I think the reality is? I think a lot of fast food work, and I think we can all see this happening, is going to be taken over by robots and AI in the not too distant future. I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat or anything, but you think about it, it makes sense. If the machines are basically cooking your food, keeping it perfectly fresh, making sure everything is within holding time, no human error, you're going to get a lot more consistent product. You know what you're going to be getting every single time. And then you're not going to have the cost of labor. Like labor costs in these kind of business, again, I used to be a manager. If you were being really stingy, would be about 14%. If you're running like a well-oiled machine, you're probably looking at 18 to 20%. That's a lot of overheads gone and going straight into these companies' pockets, you know?
Now, individually, this is a fantastic trend. Unless you are an extremely high-income earner or working an equally extreme schedule, cooking for yourself is one of the best things you can do to improve your health and personal finances. So if you can do it, you probably should do it. But for society at large, when fast food becomes a luxury, that should raise a few alarm bells. Grocery store food has also become much more expensive, and more people than ever now work multiple full-time jobs, so finding the time amongst that schedule to also prepare food is hard. That's also ignoring that according to US Census data, around 9% of households below the federal poverty level don't have an adequately functioning kitchen at all. Yes, a lot of people are choosing to cook from home instead of ordering some Kentucky Fried Carbs, and that's good, but a lot of people are just skipping meals altogether.
Yeah, I think so too. I think people are so broke right now, they're going back to the whole, I just got my first apartment, moved out of home, and all I live off is meagre. I think people are going back to that, you know what I mean? If you go buy a bunch of noodles in a packet in bulk, I mean, you could probably get them for $1, just over $1 each if you're getting them bulk in Australia, maybe a little bit less in the US, I don't know. Water, instant noodles, meagre, ready to go, you know what I mean? If you're really, you could eat for like $4 or $5 a day if you're eating staples. It's not ideal, it's not healthy, you're not getting your nutrients, but you're surviving. Whereas if a fast food meal's now costing $20, I mean, you know, weigh it up. People have got more money for their bills. It's a shame that they're sacrificing to that level, but it is happening.
And that's bad. A survey conducted by Credit Karma found that more than a quarter of respondents admitted to skipping meals because of rising grocery costs. This survey was also conducted on people who were using a credit score tracking service, so the population sample is probably doing better than the true average. Now, this has the potential to cause a feedback loop in low-income communities, because fast food is one of the country's largest employers. Outside of Walmart, Yum! Brands and McDonald's are the second and third largest employers of American workers. They may not be the most desirable jobs in the world, but they provide some income to millions of people. If restaurants start closing down, that could quickly become a huge unemployment problem amongst people with the least financial security to begin with.
Yeah, but as I said, that's going to become a problem anyway, because we can see what's happening in the future, you know, AI, machines, things like that. They're going to come and take a lot of these jobs, and then we need to find other things that we have to do with our day to basically provide for ourselves and contribute, you know what I mean? I don't think it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. You know, with every door that closes, another one opens. But the challenge is going to be that transition period where people get out of these type of roles and then go into something new with the advent of AI, if that makes sense. I would recommend for people just like doing some research and adapting to it now, to be honest. This is a whole big topic for another video, but I guess the way to put it is no matter what happens, AI is coming, so adapt while you can. I think these stores just closing down are probably the least of your worries, is all I'm saying. I think that future tech is going to be a big part of the future of these businesses.
Now, the story is not much better for these companies outside of America either. Most people around the world are struggling with the same financial realities of increased living costs and economic uncertainty. On top of that, America isn't exactly the most popular kid on the block at the moment. Brands like McDonald's, KFC, and Starbucks are struggling with a general anti-American sentiment across most of their markets as people are choosing to support their local chains over the unashamedly American businesses.
I don't know if that's a case in Australia, to be honest. I mean, when parents are feeling lazy or they're in the rush, boom, they still go straight to McDonald's here. As long as they have the money, that's the only catch. The only time I know when people are not buying American fast food in Australia is when they don't have the money. I don't really hear anything here myself personally about, oh, I don't like the USA, I'm not going to go buy a McDonald's burger. I haven't personally heard that myself. It could certainly be in different countries, but I don't think so here in Australia personally.
According to McDonald's own market survey, they found an increase in people in various markets saying they're going to be cutting back on purchases of American brands. Now, companies delivering poor financial news to their shareholders always comes armed with some excuses. But this is clearly a major shift in consumer behavior right when they can least afford it. Now, there is a growing group of consumers that unfortunately fast food isn't particularly good at taking advantage of. Go and watch this video next to find out how some Americans got so good at buying shit.
Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Hey look, you know what? This is usually above my pay grade, a topic like this. However, I found it very interesting and I hope you did too. Thank you for watching guys, and I'll see you on the next video.